batteries. So we have a lot of new people that have no idea what all these numbers on the batteries mean, especially the SCX24 guys. Don't know why, but we get a lot of questions from the SCX24 guys. Anyway, I think it's because there's just so many new people in the space, because the trucks are very approachable and they're easy to kind of tinker with, and there's a lot of content out there for them. So I think that's why we're bringing in new people. All you other guys, Mini Bs, Mini Zs, you gotta get more new people out here. Come on now. Anyway, the batteries, LiPos, let's talk about them and what they mean. We're gonna do a basic rundown here. We're not gonna get crazy and technical, a basic rundown on what all the numbers mean, so that when you're buying a battery, you make sure you get the right one and you don't burn anything up. Alrighty kids, so we have some of the most common batteries in the mini space for LiPos. This is not for mini. This is a 3-cell. I guess the first thing we'll start with is the S rating, or the number of cells in the battery. So these are 1S, these are 2S, and this here is a 3S. And now S stands for series. That's a series of batteries ran together to form a single pack, essentially. So 3-cell is a 3S. These are all 2S, which is a 2-cell. Again, the S is for series. It's kind of confusing that they call them the 3-cell, but then it's a 3S. But a 3S and a 3-cell is the same thing. Now, in these batteries, each cell is 3.7 volts. So a 1-cell battery is 3.7 volts. You can see this on both of them. A 2-cell battery is going to be 7.4 volts. And a 3-cell is 11.1 volts. And then they go all the way up to 6-cell, 7-cell. There's even 8-cell batteries out there, and those are just pushing out crazy power. Those are for larger RCs. Now, the second number on here that is relevant is the milliamp hours. Okay, that's the MAH. The milliamp hours is basically the capacity of the battery. A 1-cell battery with 520 milliamp hours is going to last you longer than a 1-cell battery with just 500 milliamp hours. It's basically the amount of gas you can put in the gas tank, okay? So let's look at all the 2S's that we have. We'll get rid of the 3S here and these 1S's, and we're gonna focus on all these 2S's. Now these are I use in the SCXs and some of the other smaller rigs. These are used in like the Mini Bs, Mini Ts. The interesting thing is you could actually run any of these in the Mini Bs and Mini Ts, or any of these in an SCX if you had room. You just have to have the correct adapter or plug. You see, I make plugs and adapters, and I have a video for that, and I'll post it over here on how to make new adapters, because a lot of these batteries come with different adapters on them, or maybe not the ones you need. So there's a couple different ways to handle that. You can cut the wires, redo the plug, or you can make an adapter. That way you can keep the plug maybe that was stock and you just switch the adapter, or maybe you use these, like in this example, I use them in different rigs. So one rig uses this adapter, one uses this one. So it just kind of depends on what you're doing. I try to get them all over to this style for my larger cars, and this style, these are called JSTs, for the smaller cars. Anyway, back to the 2S stuff. The main difference here between all of these batteries is form factor and the MAH, okay? So basically how large the battery is and how much energy it can store. The last thing that's on here is a C rating. And it's not really the last thing, but one of the other important things is the C rating. C rating is your discharge rate. Now, these are very inaccurate, and some people swear by them, and it depends on the battery manufacturer. There's a whole lot of factors, but essentially the idea behind the C rating is that the higher the C rating, the higher the discharge rate, the more power that can be outputted basically from the battery to the ESC quickly. So it's kind of like your fuel pump, right? It's how quickly can you get fuel out of your gas tank through your carbs, or it's like a carburetor even, just out of your gas tank and into the engine running. That's kind of what your C rating is. So the more punch you want, the higher C rating you're going to need. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to make your car go faster, right? Generally, to make a car go faster, you have to up the S rating. So you have to go from a 2-cell to a 3-cell. In one of my videos, which I'll post over here, we take an Enduro, which is a 1-cell. It's an Enduro 24, little truck. It comes with this battery. It's a 1-cell, and the electronics were able to withstand the 2S. So we put a 2S battery in it, and it made it go faster because you're getting more voltage, 3.7 volts versus 7.4 volts. That's all going to depend on your electronics and your motor and whatnot. If you put a 3S into it, not just because this is big, right? They make 3Ss that are tiny, just like this or this. If you put a 3S into a car that can only handle 1S, you're going to fry it. It's going to smoke your ESC and you're going to release the ghost and it's going to be bad times. So you need to know what your electronics can handle from a voltage standpoint. Okay. The number of cells doesn't determine the size of the battery necessarily, but again, more cells means it is going to be larger overall. And if you're going to have a small if this were a 3S, your milliamps would be much smaller because you're fitting 3 batteries essentially into one battery. And so you would expect a 3S of this size to probably be around 120 milliamp hours. And if this were a 1S, it'd be like 8,000 milliamp hours. Okay. So it's a balance between the amount of power you need to store your milliamp hours, the series that you want to run, so your voltage, okay, and then, like I said, your output, your C rating. Again, the C rating, it's hard to tell on some batteries. I've had some batteries that are 20C and others that are 60C, and they feel exactly the same. That could be the electronics, it could be the manufacturer of the battery. The higher quality of the battery, the more accurate your C rating is going to be. All right, on some of these batteries, you'll see something called watt hours. Watt hours are essentially the same as your milliamp hours, but more accurate to the voltage that would come out regardless of the capacity of the battery. So your milliamp hours and your voltage are kind of tied together. So this watt hours, if it happens to show, is an easier way technically to compare the amount of capacity a battery has regardless of the series that it is, the number of cells that it has. So when a battery is rated with its MAH, you always need to kind of associate that with the voltage. So like a 10 milliamp hour battery at 12 volts is a bigger capacity than a 10 milliamp battery at 5 volts. It's just, they're going to be outputting volts faster as well. So that's where I don't want to get too technical, but there is a difference in milliamp hours per cell. Okay. The more cells, you are inherently going to have a higher milliamp hours to get the same watt hours. So watt hours is just a way to compare across the number of cells. I wouldn't worry about that. Again, the 3 most important things that anybody's going to really care about is your S. How many S is it? 1S, 2S, 3S. How many milliamp hours? And its discharge rate. Those are the 3 numbers that really matter. And again, discharge rate is kind of low on the list. The last thing, obviously, is form factor, right? You can see here we have a stock SEX24 battery. It's a 2S 30C, 350 milliamp hours. And then here we have a 2S that is 35C. So you're not going to see much of a difference there. However, it's 1,000 milliamp hours. That means you're going to get 2.5 times more runtime out of this battery, but it is also thicker. So it really kind of comes down to battery weight and size that you want for your rig, and then you want to maximize your MAH and your technically your output, your discharge rate, your 30C. The highest MAH with the highest discharge rate at the correct size and form factor is what you want. These here, I use these in my SEX24s. I use this in my 24 or my Enduro or some of my smaller road cars. It just kind of depends. These are both the same, 400 milliamp hour, 2S, 30C. Well, this is a 30C, this is a 20C, but again, it's going to be kind of irrelevant. They're so close, you're not going to notice a difference. And then this is also a 430. It just, again, it comes down to form factor. I use these in a lot of rigs. This size, I love it. It goes on the side, it's perfect. And then the stock form factor is also fantastic as well. And then you can see, like this guy here is a 1S, so it's a lot thinner. However, it's a 500 milliamp hour, so it's a much longer runtime. But again, you're only running at 3.7 volts. 1500 milliamps, 1500 milliamps. This is a 60C. I actually don't know what this discharge rate is. And then these are 800 and 650. These are the exact same size because they're in a hard case to fit in the mini Bs and mini Ts. There is one more thing that you may see on a battery, and this is charge rate. This is, I think, the only one actually that shows the charge rate. Oh no, these also show the charge rate. These have a 1C charge rate. That's how quickly you can theoretically charge the battery. It's its resistance to being charged. The higher the charge rate, the faster you can charge the battery. Now, when it comes to charging these guys, when they're plugged into a hobby grade charger, you can usually set the amperage that you want to charge at. So generally speaking, most LiPos need to be charged slowly compared to like old NiCads or nickel metals, which can be charged pretty quickly. Ideally, you're going to charge a battery at 1 1/1000th of the mAh. So just to keep it simple, right? Like this 2200 mAh, we would charge at 2.2 amps. Okay, 2.2 amps there. Ideally, these would be charging at 0.35 amps or maybe even 0.4. These actually have a 3C charge rate versus this has a 1C charge rate. When you have a 3C charge rate, you could charge it at 3 times that rate. So if this is a 0.35 amps, you could charge this at 3 times 0.35 amps safely. That's what they're saying there with the charge rate. Most batteries have a 1C charge rate. So you essentially, like I said, you're going to charge this at 0.8, right? 1.5, 1.5, 1. Okay, so your amps should be 1/1000th of the mAh, generally speaking. That's the safe charge rate. Again, you want to charge them slowly anyway. It's better for the health of the LiPo. If you're overcharging or charging quickly, it will cause the LiPo to puff. Let's talk about safety. Now, since we're in here talking about LiPos, I need to give all the disclaimers for all the LiPo stuff, just so people know, because again, many people are new and they don't fully understand LiPos. So we're gonna discuss it. LiPos are dangerous. They can be dangerous if handled improperly. If you see a LiPo puffing up, if you see damage to a LiPo, you probably just want to get a new one. They're not that expensive and they will burn down your house if you don't properly store them. You should always store them and charge them in a LiPo bag, a fire safe container for long-term storage. When it comes to actually the proper way of storing the battery itself, as far as the charge is concerned, you basically charge them halfway, okay? It's 3.8 volts per cell. So most LiPos, you can charge them to about 4.2 volts per cell. If you fully charge a LiPo and then store it for a long period of time, it will puff up. It can catch fire. It can spontaneously combust. You should never, ever store a LiPo long-term, more than 2, maybe 3 days max at full charge. You want to discharge it. You want to run it in your car, get it down to a safer voltage. Most good modern chargers for LiPos will have a storage mode or a way to check your voltage. And you want basically 3.8 volts per cell. Okay. So a good charger will show you each cell. Another thing is you don't want to run the batteries down too low. So most ESCs and modern ESCs will have a voltage cutoff. And sometimes on USCX24 guys, you'll be like, my steering works, but my throttle's not. Or even the Mini Bs. My steering works, but my throttle doesn't. That's because your ESC is kicked in to cut off voltage being pulled out of these. You don't want to run them too low. If you run them too low, they also get damaged. And in the multi-cells, so in a 3-cell and a 2-cell, your cells can get imbalanced. And if they're too far imbalanced, say you have 2.5 volts on one cell, which is very, very low, and 3.5 volts on the other cell, it can't balance charge them. And just so you know, that's what these cables here are for. These are balance cables, right? This plugs into your charger generally. You can charge it through either one, but you generally, on a higher quality charger, you'll plug this in to charge, and then this also will give you feedback to the charger telling it how much each cell has and can charge through that to balance out the cells. So balance charging is very important on multi-cell batteries. You don't have to balance charge on single cells. That's why they don't have a balanced cable. And you don't have to charge them fully. You can charge them partially and run them. You're not going to get as much runtime, obviously, but it's not one of those things like old nickel metals where if you don't charge them fully and then you run them, they create memory. LiPos have no memory. They don't remember anything about charging. The only thing they care about is being fully charged for too long or fully discharged at all. You do not want to discharge them completely at all. So again, that's why there's cutoffs in your ESCs that kind of stop you from running. If you leave batteries plugged into your rigs, no, because a lot of ESCs, especially some of the lower end ones, they will drain the battery continuously. Even the new SEX24 electronics, they will continuously drain the battery and you will destroy the battery. The brand new truck, plug in the battery, let it sit there, come back a week, 2 weeks later, there's a good chance that your battery is shot. And if you try to charge it, you could have issues. It could puff and it could catch on fire. If you ever see puffing or they feel warm, stop charging it, get rid of the battery, safely discard it, or talk to somebody who knows and say, hey, is this battery good or bad? You've got to be careful. These will burn down your house. Anyway, I'm kind of ranting here. I just want to make sure people understand the importance of checking your batteries, charging your batteries properly, storing your batteries properly. If it's more than 2-3 days, store them in a storage mode, or run them down a little bit. Again, you don't want to run them down all the way. You want to about halfway, 3.8 volts per cell. So you really don't want batteries to go above 4.2 volts or below 3 volts. Again, going below 3 causes irreversible damage and performance loss and all kinds of bad things. And if it's overcharged, it could puff and burst into flames and burn your house down. It's about 50 to 60% is where you want to store them. So again, that's going to be about 3.8 volts. Man, these videos always just end up so much longer than I expect. This is supposed to be like 2 minutes, but hopefully there was a lot of good information in there and you learned something, even if you have knowledge on this and you're not brand new. Maybe there's some new stuff in there that you learned. If you did, or you just want to be awesome, be sure to subscribe, share this video to anybody that asks a question about batteries. You can just link them to this video, give them all the information without having to type it all out. Hit the bell button so you know when new content comes, and get out there and run your cars. Have fun. That's the whole point of the hobby. Let's get some new people in this hobby, show your friends, and yeah, have a good time. All right, be safe, guys.